In Jose Quintana's Mets debut in spring training, he got absolutely rocked. Considering the fact that David Peterson was better in his spring outing, did the Mets make a mistake in signing Quintana? Are we all just overreacting? I'm going to discuss that and preview Quintana's season. Today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Jose Quintana makes his Mets debut against the Houston Astros. Big game for him in front of some Mets fans over at Clover Park. Let's see what the guy has. Gives up 4 hits, 5 runs, walks 1, only gets 2 outs, and gives up a homer. His ERA is 67.50. So naturally, as part of spring training overreactions, the Mets made a massive mistake and they never should have signed Jose Quintana, right? Wrong. Okay, let's not jump off a cliff based on one spring outing. I think there is a conversation to be had, and we will have it, about the fact that I think David Peterson is a better pitcher than both Jose Quintana and Carlos Carrasco at this stage of their respective careers. But at the same time, David Peterson has minor league options. David Peterson pitched in a mixed role last year and thrived, going in the rotation, out of the rotation, really doing well in that type of an uneven environment. And you're going to need more than 5 starting pitchers in a season. So ultimately, I don't have any problem with Jose Quintana being part of this team. But let's look back at his career and really understand the player that the Mets signed, because he got 2 years because of what he just did. He found something last season. He pitched to a 2.93 ERA. That was over 165 and 2/3 innings pitched. But look at the strikeout rate. 7.44. He's never going to be a guy that gets those strikeouts. Now, the walk rate, 2.55. He's never going to kill you on walks either. The question is, can he keep the ball in the yard, or is he going to give up his home runs and really hurt himself that way? Because last year, the reason why he pitched to a 2.93 ERA is because his home run per 9 rate was all the way down at what's looking like a career low as I'm scanning through his Fangraphs page. Yeah, he had a year in 2014 where his home run per 9 was 0.45. Last year it was better at 0.43. He was not giving up any home run balls. His home run to fly ball rate was 5.3%, right in line with what he did in 2014, and that is where you get a really low ERA. If he's getting the ball on the ground, and the ground ball percentage last year was 46.4%, and he's not giving up the home run ball, is keeping it in the yard, and he's leaving guys on base, which he did last year at a 74.2% clip, you're going to get that minuscule ERA. The interesting thing is you look at his FIP, which is fielding independent pitching, which tries to take defense out of it, 2.99. So that says that, he was about what the numbers indicate. But then we look at the expected ERA and the expected FIP. 3.86 for the expected ERA, 3.72 for the expected FIP. So that is expecting some regression as he goes into this year. Now, one of the things that helped Quintana when he was pitching this year is with Pittsburgh, he did have an elite defender at third base in Brian Hayes, and some pretty decent defenders, I guess, mixed in throughout. But that's the one notable guy I would look at. And then with the Cardinals, where he got even better, he was playing against one of, if not the best defenses in all of baseball. And with St. Louis, that's where his numbers took a whole nother level, where he pitched to a 2.01 ERA and 12 starts down the stretch. He started game 1 of the wild card round for St. Louis. That is how good he was. That is how much they valued Jose Quintana. That also is a reflection on who else they had in their starting rotation. The thing is, we look at Quintana's career prior to last year, and you could understand why some fans or some evaluators would have a little bit of trepidation about what he's going to be this season. You look at what he did as a White Sox. Unbelievable pitcher. 3.76 ERA as a rookie, 3.51 next year, 3.32, 3.36, 3.20. He was a sub 3.5 ERA pitcher for 3 seasons where he racked up over 200 innings per season, and he had 4 seasons in a row where he ate 200 plus innings. So that is really impressive. Then he gets traded. He gets traded in the 2017 season, was not off to the best start with the White Sox, goes to the Cubs, gets a little bit better, 4.49 ERA with the White Sox. There's a lot of rumors about him getting traded. Gets moved, 3.74 ERA. Next year with the Cubs, 4.03 ERA. Following year, 4.68 ERA. 2020 season, 4.50 ERA. 2021, he starts off in Anaheim. He has time in Anaheim and with the Giants. Only pitches 63 innings between the 2 stops. Has a 6.43 ERA. Looks like he's on its way out. Signs with the Pirates as a reclamation project, and he was reclaimed. Had a good year. Goes to St. Louis. Has a great finish. Gets a 2-year deal for $26 million. Ultimately, the New York Mets are hoping he can be something close to what he was last year, or at least pitch to the career norms. His career ERA at this point, when you add in the good, the bad, and the ugly and the gray at times, is a 3.75 ERA. If Jose Quintana pitches to that this year and gives the Mets 25 starts and 140 innings, I think they'd be thrilled and they'd be perfectly fine with what they paid. The only question is, can he be that good again? Can he have another season that matches or gets close to what he just did? Or is he more the guy that he was in the previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, who was looking to be on the other end of his prime and on his way out? And I think that is the debate, and that is the concern with Jose Quintana. But I am not concerned based on one spring outing. I'm concerned based on the larger track record, yet I still can make an argument that it was a great signing. And so we're going to do that throughout the show. In the next segment, I want to get into his projections. I want to also look into the projections of Carlos Carrasco and kind of preview his season as well as these guys make up the back of the rotation. I'll make a little bit of a case for David Peterson, and then we'll close the show looking at the contract as a whole and if the Mets did in fact make a mistake here. Before we get to that though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point in the NBA season has passed. We're now in that stretch run heading into a playoff push, which makes this the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers are getting a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to 3-point strained to, the spread on the game. Whatever you're looking for, FanDuel has it. You can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. I know personally with the MLB season upon us, I'm looking at MLB futures, and Kodai saying up plus 750 for the Rookie of the Year is a must bet in my opinion. Don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now let's get into the projection models on Jose Quintana. You go to FanGraphs and you'll see there's a green section that gives you all of the projections for a player heading into 2023. So you got Zips, you got the Bat, you got ATC, you got Steamer. I like to just look at all of them and get a general range. What are the projection models telling us? So for Jose Quintana, the low end of his projected innings is 133.7. But that is Zips, which is not as much depth chart based. You then look at the ones that do factor the depth chart, and they have him between 148 and 158 innings. So they have him making 29 to 30 starts pretty much across the board. The ERA they're projecting is between 3.77 on the low end, 4.34 on the high end. I believe ever since they've made this signing, I've been discussing Quintana and Carrasco as a tandem almost, and I've said basically on the highest end, you'll get a 3.5, and on the lowest end, you'll get a 4.5, and it's about all the innings they eat in between. That's basically what the projection models are telling us. They're not really expecting to get as good of a season as last year, certainly, or even a 3.5, with 3.77 being his best projected ERA, but a durable pitcher that's going to eat innings for you, and on a team that has a great bullpen and a good offense, that could be plenty of good that he value that he can bring to the table here. Now, his strikeout rates, they're going to hover. They have him projected really in the low 8s, which would be more than he had last season, so that's interesting. The walk ticking up as well. The home runs definitely up around 1 per 9 as opposed to the 0.43, which would explain that climb in ERA. You compare his projection models to Carlos Carrasco, and they are favorable. Carlos Carrasco, it's projected at 28 starts across the board between 140 and 150 innings, but the ERA on the low end is 3.95, on the high end it's 4.57, and a lot of it is in the low 4s as opposed to Quintana, where you're looking at it, and yes, there's some low 4s, but there's a lot of high 3s in there as well. So he's projected, Quintana is, a little bit better than Carrasco, but it's a very similar type of skill set from pitchers that are in their mid-30s. For Quintana, age 34 season. For Carrasco, age 36 season. You're paying them a combined $27 million this year. With that said, it's depth. It's good depth. And you are one injury away from David Peterson being in your rotation, and you feel great about that. That's the crazy thing is, I think David Peterson is the best pitcher of the bunch, and we're still going to preview him with Tyler McGill, where we'll really dive into these numbers. But I'm looking at a Steamer projection model that has David Peterson at a 3.13 ERA, and all of them outside of Zips have him below a 4 at really the 3.6 range. And the strikeouts are all projected in the high 9s, if not in the 10s. Last year, his strikeout per 9 was 10.73. So I don't think I'm crazy when I say that David Peterson could be the number 4 starter on this team, and probably should be based on where I think he's at in his career compared to these other guys. Not to overreact to spring training at all, but David Peterson at his spring outing struck out 5 and 2 scoreless. David Peterson has a pitch in his slider that was whiffed last year at a 47% clip, which put him top 5 in all of baseball when it comes to his slider. His fastball has gotten better. He's learned how to pitch. I'm a fan of David Peterson. I recorded a podcast earlier this offseason, you can find it, where I was making a case that he could be the 3 starter on this team by the playoffs. I really felt that you could have, and at the time, I don't even remember if it was pre-DeGrom Verlander, or maybe it was, I think it could be, if they re-signed DeGrom, it could have been DeGrom, Scherzer, and Peterson, or if it was after Verlander, where I thought that he could climb up and be the 3 starter. Maybe it was before Senga. I think it probably was, because Senga's the clear 3 on this team. But even to that extent, if Kodai Senga doesn't translate, I still wouldn't be shocked. I think David Peterson is the most undervalued starter on this staff. I think David Peterson could go out this season and pitch to a 3.3 ERA if he had the opportunity to go out there every 5th inning and strike out a lot of batters. But I don't think he gets that opportunity, and that's fine, because what you signed this offseason is depth. And ultimately, as the 6th starter on the depth chart, Peterson's time is going to come. Last year, he eclipsed 100 innings, and he was arguably 7th on the starting depth chart. I guess he theoretically was, because you just saw a lot of injuries earlier where DeGrom went down, so that bumped McGill into the rotation, but McGill was ahead of him on the depth chart. And he still found his way to make some starts when McGill went down, and all of a sudden, here you go, David Peterson's in the rotation. So I think, bottom line, all these guys are going to get starts, and the Mets might even employ a 6-man rotation at times, with Kodai Senga coming over from Japan, where they do employ 6-man rotations, and guys pitch like once a week. That could help him. It could help the 2 veterans, and Verlander and Scherzer, make it through the year healthy. So I don't know if they'll do it to start, or if they'll just find pockets of the season where maybe they'll give everybody a day and plug Peterson in there. Everyone's going to get their opportunities. I do believe that Peterson's the best of those 3, but I'm not mad at the Mets for starting the season with Carrasco and Quintana atop the rotation, or not top the rotation, in the rotation as the 4 and the 5 starter. But The question still remains, was it a good signing, or was it maybe not the best use of resources to give Quintana $26 million over 2 years? I'll discuss that in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Jose Quintana got a 2-year, $26 million deal. Was that an overpay from the Mets? Should they have looked elsewhere? No, it was not. It was a good value signing. You look at what other guys got in the market. Taijuan Walker got $18 million per year for 4 years. Jamison Tyone got $68 million for 4 years. These are guys that have question marks that you might not have wanted to pay in year 3 or 4. I like the Tyone contract more than the Walker contract, but regardless, that is a reality of what happened here. Now, maybe the Mets were patient. They could have got Nate Eovaldi or something like that maybe fits better. And I know they were in the market for Andrew Heaney, and the Rangers ended up grabbing him. There's always that push and pull where there's some guys who are happy to go to a really good team like the Mets, where they are, expected to be part of the rotation, but there's a lot of competition. There's some guys that want to sign elsewhere where they're more guaranteed not only a spot in the rotation, but really no one pushing them. Jose Quintana signed a 2-year deal with the Mets. There's no guarantee there's going to be a spot for him in the starting rotation in 2024. What there is a guarantee is he's going to get $13 million in 2024, and that's what gets him to sign on the dotted line. But this past year, Mets go into the offseason, and they lose Bassett, DeGrom, Walker. They knew, though, that they were going to get a top-flight starter, and I think by the time they made their decision on Carlos Carrasco, they probably had a decent idea that they'd be able to nab Verlander. I'm not saying they knew they had Senga in the bag, but they probably thought between Senga or Chris Bassett, some of the other names that were out there, they could have landed another guy. They also knew that they had enough interest that they were going to shop in the market for a Quintana type. And yet, they picked up the option on Carlos Carrasco, even with David Peterson on the roster, even with Tyler McGill on the roster, even with Joey Lucchesi coming off Tommy John. And I even look at Jose Butto as legitimate starting depth this year. I don't look at Eleazar Hernandez as that type of depth, but he is on the roster currently. My point is, at $14 million without a complete defined role, the Mets decided to pick up that option on Carlos Carrasco because on a short-term deal, it's tough to find veteran starting pitching depth that you can just trust is going to go out and get you innings. Carlos Carrasco last year was extremely valuable to the Mets. He took the ball every 5th day, and he was a pitcher that gave you a chance to win more than he didn't. Did he have his bad starts? Absolutely. Did he have his great starts? Yes. And did he have his starts where he went 5 2/3 and gave up 3 runs? Sure. But if you have a good lineup, you have a good defense, you have a good bullpen, those are valuable assets to a ball club. And so for $26 million over 2 years, no problem with signing Jose Quintana. And for $26 million over 2 years, if Carlos Carrasco is pitching better in April and, Kodai Senga hits the IL with a blister for 10 days and David Peterson had been pitching well and he takes 2 turns in the rotation and he goes 7 scoreless each time, and in that same process, Jose Quintana gets lit up 2 more times, could Jose Quintana be an overpriced version of Trevor Williams? Absolutely, he could be. And it would be fine. That's the luxury you have with Steve Cohen, and that's where this Mets team is. They wanted depth across the board. They have depth in their rotation. They have depth in their bullpen. And you look at their roster with the prospects that are coming up and some of the fringe signings they made, getting a Danny Mendick, getting a Tommy Pham, just to increase the floor of your ball club and get as many capable MLB players into the building. They have depth there too. So I think that's why they signed Quintana, and I don't think there's a single person in that front office who's losing sleep tonight because he gave up 5 runs in a spring outing. So if you're a Mets fan who did lose sleep last night because Jose Quintana got rocked, I need you to take a minute and try to think about your priorities a little bit, because there are bigger and more important things to worry about. But regardless, That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball, where you can win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.